I came home from a business trip in Charlotte, North Carolina to find my house painted bright purple, and I mean the kind of purple that makes your eyes water from 3 blocks away. My name is Oliver Grayson, and I had lived in the Meadowbrook Estates subdivision in suburban Charlotte for exactly 8 months. The whole time, I thought I was lucky to have found such a quiet neighborhood with reasonable HOA fees. My 2-story colonial had been a classic cream color with dark green shutters when I bought it. Now it looked like someone had dipped it in grape Kool-Aid and left it to dry in the sun. I stood in my driveway with my suitcase still in hand, staring at what used to be my respectable home, completely unable to process what I was seeing. The flight from Seattle had been delayed twice, and I was exhausted. For a moment, I genuinely wondered if I had somehow pulled up to the wrong house. But no, there was my address on the mailbox, and there was my truck parked in the garage where I had left it. This was definitely my house, just purple, aggressively, violently purple. I walked up to the front door, noticing the paint was still fresh enough that I could smell it. They had done the whole thing, every single exterior wall, the trim, even the garage door. My dark green shutters remained, which somehow made it look even worse. I fumbled with my keys and got inside, immediately dropping my bags and pulling out my phone. I had no messages, no missed calls, no emails about any painting. Nothing. I checked my bank account to see if maybe I had authorized this during some kind of fugue state and forgotten about it. Nope. No charges for painting services. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through my email more carefully. Finally, buried in my spam folder from 4 days ago, I found a message from the Meadowbrook Estates HOA with the subject line, Mandatory Home Improvement Notice. I opened it, my blood pressure rising with every word I read. Dear homeowner, as part of our community beautification initiative, your property has been selected for exterior painting to bring it into compliance with neighborhood standards. The work will be completed during the week of May 12th. The cost will be added to your next HOA assessment. Thank you for your cooperation in keeping Meadowbrook Estates beautiful. I read it 3 times. There was no mention of what color they planned to use. There was no request for my input. There was not even a proper warning, just this single email sent to my spam folder while I was traveling for work. And they had the audacity to say I would be paying for this. I immediately called the HOA office number listed at the bottom of the email. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. You've reached the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. Office hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Please leave a message and we'll return your call within 2 business days. 2 business days. My house looked like Barney the dinosaur's vacation home, and they would get back to me in 2 business days. This is Oliver Grayson at 2847 Maple Ridge Drive, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I just returned from a trip to find my house painted purple without my knowledge or consent. I need someone to call me back immediately. Not in 2 days, today. My number is 704-555-0147. I hung up and immediately called back, leaving a second, slightly angrier message. Then I walked outside to examine the damage more closely. The paint job itself was actually well done, which somehow made it worse. They had been thorough. Every surface was evenly coated, the edges were clean, and they had even painted the soffit and fascia. Someone had spent real time and effort making my house look like a tribute to Prince's favorite color. My neighbor Frank Martinez from across the street came walking over, his face a mixture of sympathy and barely suppressed amusement. Frank was in his 60s, retired military, and had lived in Meadowbrook for 12 years. He had warned me about the HOA when I first moved in, but I had not taken him seriously enough. They got you too, huh? He said, stopping at the edge of my driveway. 2? This has happened to other people? You're the 4th house on this street alone. Mine was 3 years ago. They painted it yellow. Not a nice butter yellow, mind you. School bus yellow. Took me 8 months and a lawyer to get permission to repaint it the color I wanted. I stared at him. You're joking. I wish I was, Oliver. The HOA president, Brenda Whitmore, she's got this idea that the neighborhood should look like a rainbow. Says it increases property values and makes the community unique. She picks the colors herself. You're purple. That's her doing. This cannot possibly be legal. Frank shrugged. That's what I thought. But according to the HOA bylaws we all signed when we bought our houses, The board has the authority to perform necessary maintenance on properties if they deem it required. They interpret that pretty broadly. My lawyer said we could fight it, but it would cost more than just repainting. But I did not even get proper notice, and they are charging me for paint I did not want. Yeah, that's their system. They send one email, usually while you are away if they can manage it, then they do whatever they want. Brenda's got her own brother-in-law's painting company on speed dial. I guarantee you are going to get billed about 3 times what the actual work cost. I felt like I was in some kind of absurdist nightmare. What color is my house supposed to be according to them? No idea. Brenda does not share her vision until it's already done. Jerry Holloway 2 streets over, they painted his house orange. Traffic cone orange. His wife nearly divorced him over it, thought he had done it himself as some kind of crisis. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. This is insane. Welcome to Meadowbrook Estates. There's a reason the houses are so affordable here. Most people figure it out after they move in. But by then you are stuck. You can try going to the next board meeting, but Brenda runs those like a dictator. Nobody gets to talk unless she allows it. After Frank left, I spent the rest of the evening researching HOA law in North Carolina. The more I read, the angrier I got. Frank was right that HOAs had broad authority, but they still had to follow proper procedures. They needed to give reasonable notice, they needed to allow homeowners to be heard, and they definitely could not just paint someone's house whatever color they felt like and then bill them for it. I barely slept that night. Every time I looked out the window, I saw that purple monstrosity glowing under the streetlights. The next morning, Saturday, I was at the HOA office at 8 a.m., an hour before they opened. I sat in my truck in the parking lot drinking coffee and rehearsing what I was going to say. By the time 9 o'clock rolled around, I had worked myself into a controlled fury. A woman in her late 40s arrived at 9:15, wearing a visor and athletic wear, carrying a Starbucks cup. She had that specific haircut, the one that should come with a warning label. Short in the back, longer in the front, with blonde highlights that looked expensive. She gave me a dismissive glance as she unlocked the office door. I got out of my truck and followed her inside. The office was small, just a reception area with a desk and a couple of chairs, and a back room I could see through an open door. The walls were covered with photos of houses in the neighborhood, all painted different bright colors. It looked like a Skittles factory had exploded. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, not looking at me as she set down her purse and coffee. "Are you Brenda Whitmore?" "I am. And you are?" "Oliver Grayson, 2847 Maple Ridge Drive, the house you just painted purple without asking me." She finally looked at me, and I saw zero sympathy in her eyes. "Oh yes, the painting crew finished that on Thursday. It looks wonderful, really brightens up that section of the street." "I did not authorize anyone to paint my house." "You do not need to authorize it. It's part of the HOA's authority under the bylaws. Your property was out of compliance." "Out of compliance how? My house was perfectly fine. It was cream-colored, well-maintained, and frankly, none of your business." Brenda sat down at her desk and turned on her computer, taking a long sip of her coffee before responding. "Mr. Grayson, when you purchased your home in Meadowbrook Estates, you signed an agreement to abide by our community standards. Those standards include maintaining your property in a manner consistent with the aesthetic vision of the neighborhood." "The aesthetic vision? Who decided purple was part of any aesthetic vision?" "I did. I'm the HOA president, and the board has given me full authority over beautification projects. We're creating a unique, vibrant community, something that stands out, something memorable." "Oh, it's memorable, all right. It looks like a children's toy threw up on my house." Her expression hardened. "I do not appreciate your tone, Mr. Grayson. I volunteer my time to make this neighborhood better. The least you could do is show some gratitude." "Gratitude? You defaced my property and now you want gratitude?" "I improved your property, and you will be receiving a bill for the service. The cost is $4,800, due within 30 days. I actually laughed out loud. "I am not paying you a single cent. You had no right to paint my house, and you definitely had no right to choose that color." Brenda opened a drawer and pulled out a file folder. She flipped through some papers and pulled one out, sliding it across the desk toward me. "This is the violation notice we issued for your property 2 months ago. Your house color was deemed non-compliant with community standards." I picked up the paper. It It was dated March 15th, more than 2 months ago, and it claimed my house was in violation of Code 7.3.2, failure to maintain exterior colors within the approved palette. I had never seen this document before in my life. I never received this. It was sent to your email address on file, which is, she looked at her computer, ograyson@techmail.com. My email is ograyson@techmail.com, tech with an H. You've been sending notices to the wrong address. Brenda shrugged. That's the address we have in our system. If it's wrong, you should have corrected it. How would I correct it if I never received any emails to know it was wrong? Not my problem, Mr. Grayson. The notice was sent. The violation was not corrected. We took action. Now you owe $4,800. I leaned forward, planting my hands on her desk. Let me be very clear. I am not paying for this. I want my house repainted the color it was before, at the HOA's expense, and I want it done immediately. That's not going to happen. The new color is the approved color. Your house now complies with community standards. What approved color palette? Can I see it? The palette is determined by the board on a case-by-case basis. So there is no actual palette. You just pick random colors and force people to accept them. I pick colors that enhance the neighborhood. If you do not like it, you're welcome to bring it up at the next board meeting. That's the 3rd Tuesday of next month. Next month? That is 4 weeks away. Yes? We meet monthly. You can sign up for public comment, though the agenda is quite full. I stood up straight, pulling out my phone. I'm going to call a lawyer. Go ahead. You will find that we are well within our rights, and if you fail to pay your assessment, we can place a lien on your property. Keep that in mind. I left the office before I said something I would regret. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, just breathing, trying to calm down. Then I did exactly what I had threatened. I called a lawyer. The first 3 law firms I contacted told me they did not handle HOA disputes. The fourth, a small practice run by a woman named Patricia Hendricks, agreed to meet with me Monday morning. I spent the rest of the weekend documenting everything, taking photos of my house from every angle, screenshotting emails, and collecting all my HOA paperwork from when I bought the house. Monday morning, I was in Patricia's office at 9 sharp. She was in her mid-30s, professional but approachable, with an office that was organized chaos, files everywhere, but she seemed to know where everything was. I told her the whole story. She listened, taking notes, occasionally asking questions. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and sighed. Mr. Grayson, I am going to be honest with you. HOA cases are difficult. The law in North Carolina gives homeowners associations significant authority, and courts are generally reluctant to intervene in what they see as internal community matters. So I am just stuck with a purple house? Not necessarily. The key issues here are notice and procedure. If they sent notices to the wrong email address, that could be a problem for them. And the fact that they painted your house a specific color and then fined you for that same color, that's interesting. Wait, they fined me? Patricia looked confused. You did not mention a fine. They billed me $4,800 for the painting. Is there a fine, too? Check your email. That is usually how they notify people. I pulled out my phone and checked. Sure enough, there was an email from that morning sent at 7 a.m. Violation notice, unapproved exterior color. I opened it, my hands shaking. Dear Mr. Grayson, your property at 2847 Maple Ridge Drive is in violation of community standards. Code 7.3.4, unapproved exterior color. The current purple color has not been submitted for board approval. You have 14 days to remedy this violation or face a fine of $100 per day until compliance is achieved. I showed the email to Patricia. She read it, and for the first time since I entered her office, she smiled. This is what we call stepping in it, she said. They painted your house purple, they are charging you for it, and now they are fining you for the color they chose. This is either unbelievable incompetence or deliberate harassment. Can we sue them? We can definitely respond. First, I am going to send them a cease and desist letter. No more fines, no more painting, no more anything until this is resolved. Second, I am going to request an emergency hearing with the board. Third, if they do not play ball, yes, we will sue them for trespass, conversion, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. How much is this going to cost me? My retainer is $5,000. If this goes to litigation, it could be more. But if we win, we can request attorney's fees from the HOA. I thought about my savings account. I thought about my purple house. I thought about Brenda Whitmore's smug face. Let's do it. Patricia drafted the cease and desist letter that afternoon. She hand-delivered it to the HOA office herself and emailed me a copy. It was 3 pages of legal language that basically said, stop everything immediately or face legal action. She also requested an emergency board meeting within 7 days to address the situation. The response came the next day, but not from Brenda. It was from a lawyer representing the HOA, a man named Douglas Pritchard from a firm in downtown Charlotte. His letter was polite but firm. The HOA stood by its actions. The painting was authorized under the bylaws, and Mr. Grayson's property was indeed in violation for having an unapproved color. However, they were willing to offer a compromise. If I paid the $4,800 painting bill and submitted an application to repaint my house a different approved color at my own expense, they would waive the daily fines. Patricia called me after she received the letter. They are not backing down. So what do? We file suit. I will get the paperwork started today. In the meantime, do not pay them anything and do not let them do any more work on your property. If you see anyone from the HOA or any contractors on your property, call the police and call me. The police? Can I actually do that? Absolutely. It's your property. If someone is on it without your permission, that is trespassing. The lawsuit was filed on Thursday, May 22nd. We sued the Meadowbrook Estates HOA, Brenda Whitmore personally, and the painting company, which turned out to be called Precision Painting and was indeed owned by Brenda's brother-in-law, a man named Kurt Simmons. We asked for damages, attorney's fees, and an injunction preventing the HOA from taking any further action against my property. The local news picked up the story 2 days later. I got a call from a reporter named Michelle Torres who had heard about the lawsuit through the courthouse filing system. She wanted to interview me. I checked with Patricia first, who said it was fine as long as I stuck to the facts. Michelle came to my house with a cameraman. The look on her face when she saw the purple was priceless. Wow, she said, that is really purple. You should see it at sunset. It glows. The interview aired that evening on the local NBC affiliate. They did a whole segment on HOA overreach, featuring my house as the prime example. They interviewed Frank Martinez, too, who showed them before and after photos of his house from the yellow paint incident. They tried to interview Brenda, but she refused to comment. Instead, they just showed footage of her walking into the HOA office and closing the door in the camera's face. The story went viral locally. By the next morning, it had been picked up by the Charlotte Observer and several local radio stations. My phone would not stop ringing with people wanting to tell me their own HOA horror stories. The Reddit post someone made about it got 50,000 upvotes. Suddenly, my purple house was famous. The attention had an unexpected effect. The HOA board, which consisted of Brenda and 4 other members who had apparently just been rubber stamping whatever she wanted, called an emergency meeting. Patricia and I were invited to attend. The meeting was held at the community clubhouse on a Wednesday evening. When we arrived, the parking lot was packed. Apparently, word had gotten out and every homeowner in Meadowbrook who had a grudge against the HOA had shown up. The meeting room was set up with a long table at the front for the board members and rows of chairs for residents. Every chair was filled and people were standing along the walls. I recognized several faces from the neighborhood, including Frank and his wife Teresa. Brenda sat in the center of the board table, flanked by 2 women and 2 men I vaguely recognized from around the neighborhood. She looked uncomfortable, which gave me a small amount of satisfaction. The meeting started 30 minutes late because they had to bring in more chairs. Brenda called things to order by banging a gavel on the table like she was a judge. This emergency meeting of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board is now in session. We are here to address the concerns raised by Mr. Oliver Grayson regarding the painting of his property. One of the other board members, a man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses, leaned forward. Brenda, I think we need to address the broader concerns too. I've received about 40 emails from residents in the last week. Brenda shot him a look. We will discuss Mr. Grayson's situation first, David. David did not back down. With all due respect, Mr. Grayson's situation is part of the broader problem. We have been getting complaints about these painting projects for years, and we have ignored them. Now we are being sued, and it is all over the news. We need to take this seriously. I do take it seriously, Brenda snapped. I have dedicated hundreds of hours to improving this neighborhood. A woman in the audience shouted, "Nobody asked you to paint our houses." Several people applauded. Brenda banged her gavel. "Order! We will have order, or I will clear this room." Patricia stood up. "Mrs. Whitmore, I am Patricia Hendricks, Mr. Grayson's attorney. Before we go any further, I would like to present several documents to the board." She walked to the front and handed out folders to each board member. These contain photos of Mr. Grayson's house before and after the unauthorized painting, copies of all correspondence, and a detailed timeline of events. You will notice that proper notice was never given, as all emails were sent to an incorrect email address. You will also notice that Mr. Grayson was fined for the very color your organization chose and painted without his consent. The board members opened the folders and started reading. I watched their faces change as they processed the information. Even Brenda looked uncomfortable. David spoke first. "Brenda, is this true? We fined him for the color we painted?" "It was an administrative error," Brenda said. "The fine was generated automatically by the system." "But you did not rescind it once you realized the error." "I was going to, but then he hired a lawyer and made this whole thing a circus." Patricia's voice was sharp. "Mrs. Whitmore, my client hired me after you refused to correct the situation and threatened him with additional fines and a lien on his property. This is not a circus. This is a man whose property rights were violated." Another board member, a woman in her 40s with curly red hair, spoke up. "I think we need to vote on this. I move that we immediately remove the fine against Mr. Grayson and reimburse him for any costs associated with repainting his house to a color of his choosing." "Second," David said immediately. Brenda looked panicked. "Wait, we cannot just unilaterally decide this. We need to consult with our attorney." "Our attorney told us we are likely to lose this lawsuit and that it could cost the HOA upwards of $50,000 in damages and legal fees," David said. "He recommended we settle. I read his memo. Did you?" Brenda did not answer. The vote was called. 4 board members voted in favor of the motion. Only Brenda voted against it. The motion passed, but I was not done. Patricia had prepared me for this. "I appreciate the board's vote," I said, standing up, "but I have another concern. I would like a full audit of the HOA's finances, specifically regarding the painting contracts. I think the board and all the residents deserve to know how much money has been spent on these projects and where that money went." Frank Martinez stood up from his seat. "I second that request. I was billed $5,200 for my house 3 years ago. I want to know if that money actually cost $5,200 or if someone was skimming." The room erupted in agreement. Multiple people started shouting about their own experiences. Brenda tried to gavel them down, but nobody was listening anymore. David held up his hands. "Okay, everyone please, let's maintain order. Mr. Grayson, your request is reasonable. I move that we hire an independent auditor to review the HOA's finances for the past 5 years, with a specific focus on painting and maintenance contracts." "Second," said the woman with curly red hair. This vote was also 4-1, with Brenda again being the only dissenting vote. She looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. The meeting continued for another hour. Multiple residents stood up to share their stories of HOA overreach. Jerry Holloway talked about his orange house and how his insurance costs went up because the color made it more visible to vandals. A woman named Susan Park talked about how the HOA had fined her $2,000 for planting roses in her front yard without approval, even though roses were not mentioned anywhere in the rules. An elderly couple described how they had been threatened with foreclosure over a $50 late fee that they had actually paid on time, but the HOA had applied it to the wrong account. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that Brenda had been running the HOA like her personal fiefdom, and the other board members had either been unaware or unwilling to stand up to her. That changed tonight. David made one final motion before adjourning. "I move that Brenda Whitmore be removed from her position as HOA president, effective immediately, and that all her authorities be suspended pending the results of the financial audit." "Second," said the woman with red hair, whose name I learned was Jennifer Phelps. Brenda stood up, her face red. "You cannot do this to me. I have given years to this neighborhood." "And we appreciate that," David said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But the liability you have exposed us to is unacceptable. This is not personal, Brenda. It is business." The vote was 4-1. Brenda was out. She gathered her things and stormed out of the meeting without another word. Several people in the audience applauded. I just felt exhausted. After the meeting, David approached me and Patricia. "Mr. Grayson, on behalf of the board, I want to apologize. This should never have happened. We will cover the full cost of repainting your house whatever color you want, and we will reimburse you for your legal fees." "I appreciate that," I said, "but I want to see that financial audit too. I think there is more going on here than just bad judgment." "I agree," David said. "We have already reached out to an auditing firm. They will start next week." Patricia and I left the meeting feeling cautiously optimistic. The immediate problem was solved, but there were still a lot of questions. The audit results came back 6 weeks later, and they were even worse than I had imagined. The auditor, a forensic accountant named Richard Chen, presented his findings at a special board meeting that was, again, packed with residents. Richard was methodical and precise. He laid out a pattern of financial irregularities going back nearly 4 years. Precision Painting, owned by Brenda's brother-in-law Kurt, had been paid over $380,000 for various painting projects during that time. The auditor had contacted other painting companies in the area and gotten quotes for the same work. The market rate for all those projects should have been around $150,000. The HOA had been overcharged by at least $230,000. But it got worse. Richard traced the money flow and found that Kurt's company had made regular payments to a consulting company called Whitmore Consulting, LLC. That company was owned by Brenda's husband, Thomas Whitmore. Over the course of 4 years, Whitmore Consulting had received $180,000 from Precision Painting for services that were never clearly defined. In other words, Brenda had been using her position as HOA president to funnel money to her family. She would authorize unnecessary painting projects. Her brother-in-law's company would massively overcharge for the work, and then he would kick back most of the excess to her husband's shell company. The room was silent as Richard finished his presentation. Then everyone started talking at once. "This is fraud," someone shouted. "We need to call the police," another person said. David, who had taken over as interim HOA president, held up his hands. "Everyone, please. We are going to handle this appropriately. We've already contacted the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. They are aware of the audit results, and they are opening an investigation." "What about our money?" Frank Martinez asked. "Can we get it back?" "We are exploring all legal options," David said. "We will be filing a civil lawsuit against Brenda Whitmore, Thomas Whitmore, Kurt Simmons, and Precision Painting. And we are also reporting this to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges." Patricia leaned over and whispered to me, "This is bigger than your purple house now." She was right. Over the next few weeks, the story grew. The Charlotte Observer ran a front-page article about HOA fraud. The local TV stations did follow-up reports. Someone created a Facebook group called Meadowbrook Estates Victims United that quickly grew to over 300 members. In late July, the police arrested Brenda Whitmore, her husband Thomas, and her brother-in-law Kurt Simmons. They were each charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The mugshots were all over the news. Brenda's mugshot in particular became a meme. She had that "let me speak to the manager" look, but with the added twist of being in actual legal trouble. My house got repainted in early August. I chose a nice, subtle sage green with white trim. It looked respectable and normal, exactly what I wanted. The HOA paid for everything, including premium paint and a better contractor than Kurt's company had ever been. The legal process dragged on through the fall. The civil lawsuit was filed in September. The criminal trial was scheduled for February of the following year. Patricia kept me updated on everything, though I was no longer directly involved. My part was done. In November, the HOA held elections for a new board. David decided not to run again, saying he had had enough drama for one lifetime. Jennifer Phelps ran for president, along with 2 other candidates. Jennifer won easily. One of her first acts was to completely overhaul the HOA bylaws to add more oversight and homeowner protections. No more unilateral painting projects. No more fines without proper notice and an appeals process. No more board members awarding contracts to family members. I attended the first meeting under the new board. It was boring, which was perfect. They discussed playground maintenance, a new neighborhood directory, and plans for a holiday party. Normal HOA stuff. No drama, no corruption, just neighbors trying to maintain common areas. It was refreshing. The criminal trial happened in February, just like scheduled. Patricia and I both attended, along with dozens of other Meadowbrook residents. The prosecution laid out the entire scheme, using Richard Chen's audit as the backbone of their case. They showed how Brenda had systematically abused her authority, how Kurt had deliberately overcharged for work, and how Thomas had created a fake consulting company to hide the money. The defense tried to argue that the HOA bylaws gave Brenda broad authority and that the pricing was just aggressive but not illegal. The jury did not buy it. After 3 days of testimony and 4 hours of deliberation, they came back with guilty verdicts on all counts for all 3 defendants. Brenda was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay $230,000 in restitution. Thomas got 3 years. Kurt got 2 years and had his contractor's license permanently revoked. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Patricia Wallace, gave a speech during sentencing about the abuse of trust and how HOAs, while having legitimate purposes, could not be allowed to become vehicles for personal enrichment. The civil lawsuit settled a month later. The defendants' homeowner insurance and business insurance policies covered most of the stolen money. The HOA recovered about $190,000 of the $230,000, which was distributed to homeowners who had been overcharged. I got a check for $3,300, representing the difference between what the purple paint job should have cost and what the HOA had been charged for it. I donated it to a local nonprofit that helped homeowners fight predatory HOA practices. By summer, life in Meadowbrook Estates had mostly returned to normal. The neighborhood became known as that place where the HOA president went to jail, which was not the best reputation, but it could have been worse. Property values actually went up a bit once word got out that the HOA was under new, competent management. I ran into Frank Martinez at the grocery store one Saturday in June. We chatted for a few minutes, and he told me something I had not heard. You know, Jerry Holloway finally repainted his house, right? After everything went down, the new board approved his request immediately. It is a nice tan color now. His wife is much happier. That's good, I said. What about your house? Still yellow, Frank said with a grin. You know what? I have kind of grown to like it. It is unique. Plus, every time I look at it, I remember that we took down a corrupt HOA president. That is worth keeping it yellow. I laughed. I guess that's one way to look at it. How is your greenhouse treating you? It is perfect. Boring and perfect. Boring is underrated, Frank said. He was right. After everything I had been through, boring was exactly what I wanted. The anniversary of the purple paint incident came around in May of the following year. A reporter from the Charlotte Observer called me to do a follow-up story. I agreed, and they sent Michelle Torres, the same reporter who had done the original story. We sat on my porch, looking at my now respectable sage green house. Michelle asked me what I had learned from the whole experience. I learned that HOAs can do a lot of good when they are run properly, I said. Maintaining common areas, organizing community events, keeping up standards. But they need oversight, they need transparency, and homeowners need to pay attention. If we had all been paying attention to what Brenda was doing years ago, this never would have gotten so bad. Do you regret buying a house in an HOA neighborhood? Sometimes, I admitted, but mostly no. I love my house. I love most of my neighbors. We just had to clean out the corruption. That is worth doing. What would you say to other homeowners dealing with HOA problems? Document everything. Get a lawyer if you need to. Do not be afraid to push back and get involved with your HOA board. Go to the meetings, read the budgets, ask questions. These organizations only work if the homeowners participate. The article ran the next week with the headline, 1 year later. How a Purple House Brought Down an HOA Empire. It was a nice summary of everything that had happened. Several people emailed me after it came out, thanking me for fighting back and asking for advice on their own HOA situations. I answered what I could and referred them to Patricia for legal questions. Life moved on. I dated a teacher named Rebecca for a few months, but it did not work out. I got a promotion at work that came with a significant raise. I adopted a dog, a rescue mutt named Copper, who loved to bark at squirrels in the backyard. Normal life stuff. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA became a model for other communities dealing with similar issues. Jennifer Phelps, the new president, spoke at several community forums about governance reform. The bylaws changes we had implemented were copied by other HOAs across North Carolina. Some good had come from the chaos. I occasionally drove past houses that were still painted in Brenda's vibrant colors. Most had been repainted by now, but a few remained. Frank's yellow house, a light blue house on Oakmont Street, a coral-colored house near the community pool. They stood as monuments to a strange chapter in our neighborhood's history. In the fall, almost 18 months after the purple paint incident, I was invited to speak at a city council meeting about HOA reform legislation. The city was considering new regulations that would require HOAs to register with the city, submit annual financial reports, and follow specific procedures for fines and property modifications. I testified in favor of the regulations, telling my story once again. The regulations passed unanimously. The council members thanked me for bringing the issue to their attention. One of them joked that I should run for city council myself. I politely declined. I had had enough of governance battles for one lifetime. On a quiet evening in December, almost 2 years after coming home to find my house purple, I sat on my front porch with Copper at my feet and a beer in my hand. The neighborhood Christmas lights were starting to go up. Frank had outlined his entire yellow house in white lights, which actually looked pretty good. Music drifted from someone's house down the street. Kids were riding bikes in the fading daylight. It was peaceful. It was normal. It was exactly what I had wanted when I bought a house in Meadowbrook Estates. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Just got word. Brenda's appeal was denied. The conviction stands. I texted back a thumbs-up emoji. That chapter was finally completely closed. Copper barked at a cat walking across the street. I reached down and scratched behind his ears. "Good boy," I said. "Good boy." The sun set over the neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. My sage green house looked warm and inviting in the twilight. This was home. Not because of the color of the paint or the rules of the HOA, but because I had fought for it. I'd stood up for what was right, and I had won. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I had just paid the $4,800 and moved on. If I had accepted the purple and tried to make the best of it, would I still be in Meadowbrook? Would Brenda still be running her scheme? How many more homeowners would have been victimized? But I had not accepted it. I had pushed back. And because I did, an entire community was better off. The temperature was dropping, and I could see my breath in the air. Winter was coming. I finished my beer and stood up, Copper following me inside. The porch light glowed yellow, illuminating the green walls of my house. My house. The color I had chosen, the home I had defended. Inside, I made dinner and watched a basketball game on TV. The Hornets were playing the Lakers. It was a close game, entertaining but ultimately meaningless in the grand scheme of things. Just like my house being purple had been ultimately meaningless, except for what it revealed. That was the thing about standing up for yourself. Sometimes the issue itself was not important, but the principle behind it was everything. I had not fought for the right to have a sage green house. I'd fought for the right to make decisions about my own property. I'd fought against corruption and abuse of power. I had fought for accountability. And I had won. The legal bills had been steep, even with the settlement covering most of them. The stress had taken years off my life. The publicity had been uncomfortable at times, but it had been worth it. Over the next few months, I settled into a comfortable routine. Work, home, taking care of Copper, the occasional date that went nowhere. I joined a softball league with some guys from the neighborhood, including Frank. We were terrible, but it was fun. The HOA meetings continued to be boring, which remained wonderful. Jennifer Phelps ran the board efficiently and transparently. Every decision was documented. Every expense was justified. Every homeowner who wanted to speak at a meeting was allowed to do so. It was how HOAs were supposed to work. In March, I got an unexpected call from a documentary filmmaker in California. She had read about my story and wanted to make a short film about HOA corruption, using my case as the centerpiece. I was hesitant at first, but Patricia encouraged me to do it. The more attention on this issue, the better, she said. So I agreed. The filmmaker, whose name was Jennifer Chen, flew out to Charlotte with a small crew. We spent 2 days filming interviews, B-roll of the neighborhood, and recreations of key moments. She interviewed Patricia, David, Jennifer Phelps, Frank, and several other residents. She even got an interview with the prosecutor who had handled the criminal case. The documentary premiered at a film festival in Los Angeles 6 months later. I did not attend, but Jennifer sent me a link to watch it online. It was 28 minutes long and titled The Color of Fraud. It was well done, balancing the absurdity of the purple house with the serious criminal conduct underneath. The ending featured me talking about the importance of civic engagement and standing up for your rights. The documentary won an award at the festival and was picked up by a streaming service. Suddenly, my story was reaching a national audience. I got emails from people all over the country sharing their own HOA horror stories. Some were funny, some were infuriating, and some were heartbreaking. I replied to as many as I could, offering advice and encouragement. I became an accidental advocate for HOA reform, something I never would have predicted when I bought my house in Meadowbrook Estates. Years passed. The purple paint incident became a defining moment in my life, but not the only moment. I eventually met someone, a woman named Vanessa, who worked as a nurse at the local hospital. We dated for a year before I proposed. She said yes. We got married in the backyard of my sage green house, with Copper serving as the unofficial ring bearer. Vanessa knew all about the HOA saga. She thought it was hilarious and heroic in equal measure. "You fought City Hall and won," she would say. "Not many people can say that." "It was not City Hall," I would correct her. "It was a homeowners association." "Same principle," she would reply. We talked about moving to a different neighborhood, one without an HOA. But ultimately, we stayed in Meadowbrook. The community had become important to me. The people were good. The neighborhood was well maintained, and the HOA was now one of the best run in the city. Frank Martinez retired from his job and became the new HOA treasurer. He took the role seriously, auditing every expense and maintaining meticulous records. "Never again," he would say. "Never again will someone steal from this HOA." Jennifer Phelps served as president for 3 years before stepping down. I actually ran for her position and won. It felt like the right thing to do. If I was going to live in an HOA neighborhood, I might as well help make sure it was run properly. Being HOA president was a lot more work than I had expected. I spent hours reviewing budgets, responding to homeowner requests, and organizing community events. But it was also rewarding. I helped resolve disputes between neighbors. I oversaw the renovation of the community pool. I established a reserve fund to prevent special assessments, and I made sure, absolutely certain, that no one ever painted someone's house without their permission ever again. One day, about 5 years after the purple paint incident, I was working in my garage when a car pulled up. A young couple got out looking around the neighborhood with the excited energy of first-time homebuyers. They approached me. "Excuse me," the man said. "We are thinking about buying a house in this neighborhood. Do you live here?" "I do," I said. "Going on 7 years now." "What is the HOA like?" the woman asked. "We have heard horror stories about HOAs and we are a little nervous," I smiled. "It is good. Really good, actually. Very transparent. Well run, lots of homeowner input. We had some problems a few years back, but they got cleaned up." "What kind of problems?" the man asked. I glanced at my house at the sage green walls that I had chosen. "Let's just say we learned some important lessons about accountability and oversight, but we are better for it now." They thanked me and walked on, discussing whether to put in an offer. I hoped they would. Meadowbrook Estates was a good place to live. Not perfect, but good, and when problems arose, we fixed them. That evening, I sat on the porch with Vanessa, watching the sunset. Copper was getting old now. gray around the muzzle, but he still barked at squirrels. "Do you ever think about the purple house?" Vanessa asked. "Sometimes," I said. "Usually when I have HOA board meetings. It is a good reminder of why the work matters." "Do you have any regrets?" I thought about it. No, I wish it had not been necessary. I wish Brenda had just been honest and competent. But given what happened, I am glad I fought back. A lot of good came from it. Vanessa leaned against me. "You are a good man, Oliver Grayson." I just did what anyone should do. I stood up for myself. Most people do not, though. That is what makes it special. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the neighborhood settle in for the night. Lights came on in windows, garage doors closed. A couple walked by with their dog, waving as they passed. This was home, not because of the paint color or the HOA rules, but because of the community we had built together. A community that valued accountability, transparency, and respect for each other's rights. The Purple House incident had taught me that. It had been a frustrating, expensive, stressful ordeal, but it had also been transformative. It had turned a neighborhood of passive homeowners into an engaged community. It had exposed corruption and led to real reform. It had given me a purpose I had not known I needed. And it had all started because I came home from a business trip to find my house painted the wrong color. Sometimes life works in mysterious ways. Sometimes the most absurd situations lead to the most meaningful outcomes. Sometimes fighting for something as simple as your right to choose your own paint color ends up meaning so much more. I finished my beer and stood up, offering my hand to Vanessa. "Come on, let's go inside." She took my hand and we walked into our sage green house together, copper trailing behind us. The door closed, the porch light glowed, and Meadowbrook Estates settled into another peaceful night. The Purple House was long gone, repainted years ago. But its legacy remained. In the reformed HOA bylaws, in the engaged homeowners who now attended meetings and asked questions, in the accountability structures that prevented anyone from abusing their power again, in the documentary that continued to inspire people across the country to stand up for their rights, and in one sage green house where a man named Oliver Grayson lived with his wife and his dog, secure in the knowledge that he had fought for what was right and won.